Stunning revelations, my betrayal of my husband with my stepson, a true tale of infidelity. My name is Anna Harper. My life hasn't always been ideal. But I've consistently reminded myself to appreciate what I have, as it could certainly be more challenging. My marriage to David has spanned 7 years. The initial years were enchanting. Yet over time, he found himself increasingly absorbed by his work. Our late-night conversations grew infrequent. David ceased inquiring about my emotions. He returned home late. However, it seemed as though all the effort was coming from just one side. David had a son from his earlier marriage, Ethan Walker. He was a senior in college, focusing on psychology, and frequently returned home during school breaks. The first time I encountered Ethan, I recall perceiving him as aloof, subdued, and introspective. However, over time, he transformed. Whenever we were together, he always paid close attention to me and truly cared about my words. It felt unusual and soothing. One day, David embarked on a 3-day business trip to New York. I imagined I would enjoy some peaceful days at home by myself. However, when the doorbell chimed that afternoon, I was taken aback to find Ethan there, wearing a subtle smile. "Is Dad away on a business trip? I just returned from school and figured I'd check in on him." "David isn't here, but feel free to come inside." Ethan entered, his gaze brimming with warmth. I shared with Ethan my forgotten dreams, the days when I felt adrift in my own home. Ethan spoke gently, acknowledging the sentiment. Dad has always been a bit reserved. Although he frequently expressed his love for me, I never truly felt a connection with him. His words crashed over me like a powerful tide. In that moment, it struck me that I wasn't the only one experiencing loneliness within this family. Ethan felt just as adrift as I did. The silence that enveloped us lingered for what felt like an eternity. I rose, attempting to alleviate the strain in the atmosphere. "It's quite late. It would be wise for you to take a moment to recharge. We will have ample opportunity to converse tomorrow." Ethan gazed at me, his eyes profound and earnest. "I'm pleased to have you here as well." Ethan offered a soft smile before rising to his feet. "Sleep well, Anna." I remained in the living room, observing as his silhouette faded into the hallway. That night, sleep eluded me. Not due to Ethan's presence in the house, but rather because of the peculiar and perilous emotions swelling within me. The following morning, all appeared to settle back into its usual rhythm. I made breakfast as I always do, and Ethan entered the kitchen with a radiant smile lighting up his face. "What a lovely morning it is. Wouldn't you agree, Anna?" I gave a subtle nod, attempting to conceal the discomfort stirring within me. Breakfast passed in quietude, yet despite my efforts, I found it impossible to disregard his presence. All day long, we maintained an unseen separation. I occupied my time by tidying up the house and immersing myself in books to fill the void of the hours, yet, every now and then, I sensed Ethan's gaze trailing after me. As I settled in for the evening news, Ethan made his way downstairs and remarked, "Anna, the house feels a bit stuffy. Would you like to step outside for some fresh air?" I paused for a moment, but ultimately came to a decision. The refreshing night air consistently brought me a sense of calm. We emerged onto the porch and settled onto the well-known wooden bench. I found myself at a loss for words, simply gazing forward in quiet contemplation. I realize I might not be supposed to say this, but I can no longer keep it to myself. Ethan spoke in a soft, earnest tone. "Your presence in my life holds a significance beyond what you might ever comprehend." I stood still. His words left me gasping for air. I could sense my heart racing, as though it were on the verge of exploding from my chest. "Ethan." I was about to speak, but Ethan cut me off, his eyes unwavering yet filled with sorrow. "I understand that this is incorrect. However, I cannot overlook what truly resides within me." I rose suddenly, my thoughts a whirlwind of contradictions. I averted my gaze from him, attempting to calm my racing thoughts. "We must put an end to this, Ethan. I am the wife of David. This cannot continue." Ethan released a heavy sigh, his gaze gradually wandering from my presence. "I comprehend, however. I simply wish for you to be aware. These moments will forever hold a special place in my heart." He stepped back, as though to widen the gap between us. I chose not to reply and hurried back inside the house. My heart feeling more restless than ever. That evening, slumber eluded me. Ethan's words echoed in my mind, endlessly looping like a record caught in a groove. Your presence holds greater significance than anything else. The following morning, Ethan behaved as if nothing had transpired the night before, maintaining an air of normalcy. Yet, I understood that beneath the surface, a line had already been crossed for both of us. As David came back from his business trip that evening, an unseen burden appeared to envelop the house. He entered with his familiar briefcase, and offered me a weary smile. I have returned home. You've returned sooner than I anticipated, I remarked, making an effort to maintain a composed demeanor. David entered the kitchen, and upon seeing Ethan sipping coffee, a glimmer of suspicion crossed his eyes. Did you two enjoy yourselves while I was away? David's tone was relaxed. Yet there was an underlying depth to it. Just normal, I replied swiftly, maintaining a steady tone. David looked back and forth between us for a brief moment, then offered a subtle smile. Excellent. A surge of unease enveloped me. David began to observe. A nebulous dread started to settle within me. I sensed that this delicate piece was destined to break apart. It was merely a question of time. That evening, David noted that he had an important meeting with a client and would return late. The house was enveloped in an unsettling silence after his departure. So near that I could sense his warmth beside me. Ethan stayed quiet for a considerable while before he finally spoke, his voice gentle like a whispering wind. Emotions exist. The more we attempt to stifle them, the more challenging they become to overlook. I glanced at him, prepared to voice my objections, but those earnest, glimmering eyes appeared to penetrate deep into my very essence. My breathing became more labored. Ethan, this isn't something we should be engaging in. I attempted to maintain a steady tone. I've never felt this way about anyone else. I just want you to know. I treasure every second I spend with you. My breath hitched, uneven. We can't, this is wrong. But my words were fragile and weak, like a thin thread in the midst of a storm. Ethan gently lifted my face, his eyes filled with both honesty and sorrow. If this is wrong, why does being with you make me feel so happy? In that moment, attempting to hold back the tears that were on the verge of spilling over. Ethan, I've already crossed the line. I couldn't bear to remain there for even a moment longer. I rose quickly and rushed back inside, shutting the door behind me as though I aimed to exclude the entire world. I sensed his soft voice lingering just behind me, regardless of the circumstances. My only wish is for your happiness. I leaned against the door, my chest rising and falling as I fought to regain my breath. What had just occurred felt like a tempest swirling around me, leaving me utterly adrift. My heart raced, its chaotic rhythm spiraling beyond my grasp. The softness of Ethan's kiss remained on my skin, and no matter how much I attempted to reject it, the reality was, I wasn't afraid. I sensed that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. I made my way to the living room, taking my time as I settled onto the well-known couch, my face finding refuge in my hands. Ethan's words resonated in my thoughts like a continuous murmur. If this is wrong, why does being with you bring me such joy? Those words cut through the fragile shield I had constructed around myself for so long. Content, how long had it been since I had experienced genuine happiness? When did the warmth in my marriage with David become such a distant memory? I let out a deep breath, looking for a way to persuade myself that it was all merely a case of miscommunication. Yet, my heart, that self-serving heart of mine, had silently turned against my mind long before. The echo of footsteps, the sound in the hallway startled me. Ethan stood there, his eyes brimming with a blend of affection and concern. My heart felt as if it were being tightly constricted when I met his gaze. Anna, his voice was gentle, barely above a whisper, as though he feared breaking the delicate stillness. I wished to urge him to retreat to his room, yet the words eluded me. Ethan approached me at a leisurely pace, and before I had a chance to respond, he settled down next to me. The distance that separated us felt incredibly intimate. I could sense his warm aroma, an essence both known and unfamiliar. Reminiscent of a gentle memory I had long since overlooked. "You don't have to be strong in front of me," Ethan said softly. His eyes fixed on mine as if he were trying to uncover the truth I was attempting to conceal. His hand rested gently on mine. A soft touch that was deep enough to make the entire world around me come to a halt. "I'm here to remind you that you're not by yourself." I raised my gaze, my eyes connecting with his soft, inviting stare. In that instant, I lost sight of my identity and my purpose. His presence filled every empty space within me, and that was all I knew. I inhaled gently. Yet a constriction gripped my chest. His lips inched closer again, and before I could intervene, we found ourselves enveloped in that kiss once more, sweet, deep, and brimming with longing. I couldn't even see how much I had allowed myself to drift away. Ethan's gentle breath caressed my cheek, his heartbeat resonating near mine like a captivating tune. His fingers moved softly through my hair, as though he feared I might vanish if he released his hold. I was unaware of how much time had slipped away before I softly asked, What are we up to?" My voice faltered amidst irregular breaths, yet even as I inquired, I was aware that I didn't genuinely wish to cease. I felt his heartbeat sinking with mine. A bond one had unknowingly sought for so long. Ethan grasped my shoulders, his eyes glistening, as if he yearned to convey something unspoken. "I have no intention of causing you any pain. I simply desire your happiness, genuinely joyful." His words pierced me like a sharp edge. I felt the urge to contest, to reject the emotions welling up within me. My heart remained burdened with the feelings from the previous night. There was an undeniable authenticity to it, yet it felt profoundly off. The gentle echo of footsteps drifted through the hallway. Ethan entered the kitchen, preparing coffee as he did each morning, exuding a sense of calm confidence. Every little gesture of his ignited a discomfort within me that I couldn't conceal. I emerged from my room, making an effort to appear at ease as I took my seat opposite him at the table. He glanced up at me, offering a soft smile. "Good morning, Anna." At the sound of his warm voice, my heart tightened, yet I merely nodded, steering clear of his gaze. I lifted the coffee cup, yet found myself unable to take a sip. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. What have I done? Why didn't I put an end to this? How am I meant to confront the truth at this moment? Ethan remained silent, yet I sensed his gentle, concerned gaze fixed upon me. "Are you all right?" he inquired gently. I inhaled deeply and gave a nod. "Indeed, it's simply, everything feels like too much at the moment." He placed his coffee cup down, and leaned slightly forward, his eyes brimming with sincerity, as if attempting to penetrate every barrier I had constructed around myself. "Please, don't let this weigh on your mind or fill you with remorse about the past. I want you to know that I'm here. And I will always be here." I bit my lip to stifle the tears that threatened to spill. His words radiated warmth, yet carried an undercurrent of peril. I couldn't allow myself to sink deeper into these emotions, yet attempting to erase them caused even greater pain. We lingered in silence for an extended period, both of us refraining from uttering a single word. Beyond the window, the traffic sounds started to resonate as Boston stirred to life. Yet, within the confines of the kitchen, time appeared to freeze, ensnaring me in a cycle of remorse and intense feelings. I rose to rinse my cup, but Ethan softly grasped my wrist. "Dear Anna, do not turn away from me. You shouldn't have to carry this burden by yourself." That touch left me utterly still. It was so warm that I felt an irresistible urge to remain in it endlessly, yet my logical mind raised a warning. I withdrew my hand and gazed into his eyes with delicate determination. "I require a bit of distance. Take a moment to reflect, Ethan." Ethan offered a slight nod, a glimmer of disappointment passing through his eyes, yet he honored my request. That afternoon, David came back from his business trip. I heard the front door open and his footsteps resonate through the living room. I hurried out, putting on a genuine smile as he walked in, appearing worn out. "I've arrived home. Is everything all right?" I inquired, attempting to mask the strain in my tone. David placed his suitcase down and leaned in to kiss me softly on the cheek, a gesture that was so familiar, yet it felt empty. I compelled myself to stay, yet it only heightened my awareness of the vastness. The distance that separated us had grown. Indeed, the journey was enjoyable. Yet there's a lingering sense that something was left behind at home. David surveyed the room, his eyes settling on Ethan, who had just emerged from the corridor. His eyes momentarily glimmered with a hint of suspicion, a detail I had overlooked for far too long. "Hello, my dear son. Is everything all right?" David's tone was warm. I strolled into the kitchen to pour myself a cup of coffee. Ethan stood there, propped against the counter, his expression contemplative. Upon seeing me, he offered a gentle smile. "Good morning, Anna." That smile, soft yet so recognizable, caused my breath to hitch in my throat. I nodded and swiftly averted my gaze. As if lingering a moment longer would draw me back into the emotions I was fervently attempting to evade. I observed that whenever we occupied the same space, the kitchen, the living room, even the porch, an unbridgeable silence lingered between us. We grew increasingly wary, as if even the faintest touch or the briefest glance could expose the truth to David. One afternoon, and I understood that this delicate tranquility was not meant to endure indefinitely. Eventually, all would break apart, akin to a delicate pane of glass succumbing to overwhelming force. I felt as though I was enclosed in a transparent chamber, where the world beyond remained calm and silent, yet within me, my feelings were overwhelming and stifling. David started noticing the subtle interactions between Ethan and me. His seemingly casual questions held depths of meaning that I was too hesitant to unravel. That evening, David unexpectedly called off an important meeting to enjoy dinner at home with Ethan and me. We gathered around the table, yet rather than the warmth of familial bonds, an unseen tension hung heavily in the air. David placed his knife on the table, his gaze drifting gradually from me to Ethan. "Anna, is there something you wish to share with me?" I became completely still, my entire body tensing up. "What do you mean by that?" David paused before responding, his eyes fixed on me for a moment before he turned his attention to Ethan. "What do you think, Ethan? Ever since I returned home, the two of you have been surprisingly silent." The room felt suspended in time as Ethan set his glass aside and rose, his gaze fixed intently on his father. "You consistently overlook everything until the moment has passed." David's eyebrows shot up, his unease and irritation evident on his expression. "What are you saying, Ethan?" Ethan's voice trembled with feeling, "Yet you remained oblivious and indifferent. How hard did Anna work to salvage this marriage?" My heart tightened as David leaped to his feet, his eyes brimming with fury and anguish. "And what about yourself? Do you believe it's appropriate to assess your parents' marriage?" Ethan gazed at David with steadfast resolve. "No, I don't, but I understand the depth of her loneliness, as I've experienced it myself." Ethan's words pierced through the facade I had been desperately trying to maintain. David stood still, as though he had at last grasped the complete significance of the tension between Ethan and me. I rose, my voice quivering yet resolute. "Cease this, you two." David faced me, his eyes glistening with deep sorrow. "So, it's true, isn't it?" I witnessed the breaking in his eyes. A glance that would remain etched in my memory forever. Tears filled my eyes and cascaded down my cheeks as I murmured, "I never wanted this to happen, David." However, I allowed matters to escalate beyond control. David inhaled deeply, his shoulders drooping beneath the burden of disappointment and heartbreak. Ethan bowed his head, stripped of his defiance. Just a young man who had lost the way to find his balance once more. Ethan gathered his belongings and departed the house in silence, leaving no further words behind. I lingered in the doorway, observing as his silhouette faded into the shadows cast by the faint streetlights. David entered his office and he shut the door behind him, leaving me alone in the vast emptiness of the house.